I remember that someone on the Reaper Discord, that you can look for the link in the description, asked for a way to choose between option A and option B because he was trying to do some parallel compression and he wasn't sure what he was listening to and he wanted to make some sort of equal comparison. For the most part, this video is not exclusive to Reaper. It's just some signal flow and routing things. But I will show you how to compare with equal loudness two versions of some drum parallel compression. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and we have this example for today. This is part of a mix that I did for a friend of mine. And we won't be using for now the bass and the guitar. I can mute them both because I have them grouped with the mute lead and mute follow buttons. So I said we were going to talk about routing. Let's show it in Reaper first. So the first version for this, or option 1, would be to have the audio track where everything is coming from the drums. Let's suppose for a moment that whatever you're buzzing down from your drums, like your kick, your snare, your hi-hats, is already buzzed down in this track right here. That's called done processed sends only. I'm calling it sends only because this one is not going to your speakers. It only has a couple of sends. So after you have all of your processing in this original track that has the audio buzzed down, you will make a couple of sends. One to a drum clean track that's going to be completely clean with no effects, only a fader. And you will make 3 more or whatever more sends you need for your parallel compression comparison. You will make another clean send that's going to have, as you can see, no effects whatsoever. And then I have here a parallel version for the kick drum. And here I have a parallel version for an invigorate that's parallel saturation, distortion, compression, something in between. And these 3, what's important is that they have to be either linked again using this, the grouping enabled, so the volume always goes together or is always connected so you can enable it or disable it with something like volume follow, volume lead, etc. Now if I change one, everyone follows. And I have an action that's set up here up in my toolbar that I have shown in a previous video, and I will link it in the description. That's toggle all track grouping enabled. So I can just enable or disable the groups so I can rebalance between them and I can have the best version that I want from it. And you could just link them, but I think it's better to think of buzzing them down through a folder again. So I'll have the 3 of them that I can have grouped as well. It doesn't do any harm whatsoever. And I will only deal with these 2 tracks, right? The orange one is the one that contains the clean version, a kick parallel, and a drums parallel. And the red track is only containing the clean drums. You might want to try and do it just by ear, like playing one bar and trying to match always the parallel into the clean. Because what will happen is that usually when you're adding compression or adding copies of the signal, you will get an increased volume. So it's probably safer to get this a little bit lower and always play with your faders instead of just pushing this one up and up and up. Because also this one is already relating to the 0 dB fold scale in a specific way. So you maybe don't want to push this one much more. That's a routing that you can do in every single DAW, and you can just by ear try to match them using your faders, alternating one and then the other. If I have both faders at 0 dBs, let's compare with some context. That's what helps us know if we are actually bringing things up or not. So can you listen to a difference? Because I'm actually doing a ton of compression and distortion. I'm going to push both of them a little bit more, so the drums are a little bit clearer. Let's give them some 4 dBs. I'm going to show them without the rest of the instruments. Again, the clean version. The parallel version. So how do you feel about those two? If you want to get it really precise, what you can do is, in Reaper we have this JSFX. This is something where loudness metering is actually useful. Instead of worrying about what's your number at the end of a mix or a master, this is actually useful. So I'm going to load the loudness meter peak into both tracks, and I did some small modifications because whenever you load it, it would usually show you peak clips, momentary short, loudness range average, and loops integrated. And I'm not interested in almost none of them. And as you can see, whenever I hit right click and I show it in my mixer control panel, I get this metering as long as I'm playing something. So what I want is to be able to see the momentary in my mixer control panel or my track control panel. If you're looking for a specific parameter or you're not sure where to do it, if you don't want to jump into something like the editing of the plugins, you might just want to right-click on the plugin and show effects parameters in panel. You might want to right-click the plugin and just show effects parameters in panel. And this is going to display a couple of knobs that maybe you don't see as options right there. But I modified and tweaked a couple of these. And I will link this preset in the description of the video, linked to some place. But what I did is I modified it so whenever I have them collapsed, I'm only looking at the information that I really want. And I only want to measure the momentary because this gives me a better version of the RMS metering and VU metering that was too sensitive to the low end and not giving enough information from the high end. Since this is K-filtered, this is much more precise, and the window of the metering is 400 milliseconds, so it's really good for knowing more or less how things are pumping and leveling, instead of having the short-term loops that are 3 seconds, or even the integrated that make no sense for this kind of situation. So what I want to do is I'll add another small plugin before these two. I will be using the Reapack volume gain trim because that's super easy. And I will only modify the level of, again, this one. And I want to match these two numbers. So I can unmute both of them. I can even mute my output. And I just want the number to be as close as possible. I'll check this one. And I can see that there's a 0.2 loops difference. So I'll just decrease minus 0.2. And now they should be exactly the same. As you can see, the number below is varying a lot more because that has to do with other things. I'm trying to match the peaks because the way the sound decays, it's going to be different because it's being saturated and it's being compressed. So the decay of our envelopes will be different, and that's why the metering underneath will vary a lot more. Now that I have these two options, I could just listen to them again and finally decide what I like the most. I would just render tracks to stereo stem tracks obeying the time selection, and I would just commit to that balance in the case of this one with the buzzing down of the parallel versions, instead of having a bunch of plugins just giving me some sort of nasty business here or consuming processing that not everyone has. The version 2 of this, I'm going to take advantage of a feature that I haven't honestly used enough in Reaper. That's the Sexan Paranormal FX Router, and for this it actually makes sense. So what this does is it opens up this strange window and you can select which track you're handling the effects on from here instead of going into the mixer if you just want to do these kind of things. But the creative thing is that it's a very visual way of understanding routing. So again, what I'm doing here is I have here my clean drums coming in, and it's getting processed with everything buzzed down, and I have a clean version of it, and I always want to add a plugin in these chains that work as some sort of fader, right? So first I have my loudness metering if I want to use that version of leveling things out. But if I have already set that up, the audio tracks, I don't need to do that here. This is just a way of containing all of the information. And I'm using this JS plugin just to match the levels and to match the loudness a little bit. And on this other chain that I can solo holding shift and left clicking is that I have a parallel effects. So you can see the buzz signal comes right here in, and then it goes straight to the left volume pan. That's the clean version of it. Here I have a container that's holding the weight of the kick that has a ReIQ and a root one by Leapwing Audio. We love Leapwing Audio. And here I have a second parallel compression that's done with Invigorate by Newfangled Audio. And I have, again, this couple of JS volume effects that only let me match a little bit more whatever positions I have so I can balance things out. And everything is coming out through this extra fader that I have. And again, I could do this loudness meter peak plugin just to make sure that I have the exactly same thing. I will build a version of this and I will upload it and leave it for free, again, linked in the description, with stock-only plugins. So I'll try to build something interesting for you that's pretty much usable overall. And of course, feel free to tweak the plugins. You can just access them by clicking them, and this parallel version works really well. So this idea, again, simply works. And if I want to readjust the balance of anything, I could do it just here, and I have a dry wet for every single plugin right here. Be careful of the plugins that might give some phasing issues when using Reaper's built-in dry wet knob instead of the built-in to the plugin dry wet knob. I would highly suggest for you to start exploring this kind of routing when you're trying to learn how things are routed. If I just go into a clean version and I have an FX chain clean, I will just do it with faders. I will add a fader up here. I will add a pan, and this will be a container. A container is something that contains a couple of plugins or many plugins. So here I might have utility volume pan. I could rename this one and call it clean. I could set up a parallel, and this will be Dyne1 for parallel processing, and whatever other plugins you might want, and maybe at the end just have another fader, and you can right click and rename the container and call this is a container, and this is how you build any chain. And you can save this. The great thing about naming this is that whenever you look into your mixer or your track control panel, it will actually match those names. As you can see, this is a container, and volume pan, smoother, whatever. So the version 2 is to have some sort of container built that's decreasing a lot of tracks that you might have to make. And this is extremely, extremely useful. That way I don't need these two, and I'm using only one of these with one single fader, and everything is keeping its own balance because I don't have this problem of the sense being pre-fader or post-fader, because I am just doubling my signal whenever I need it and matching the levels of it whenever I need it. If you don't want to add these extra plugins for leveling things, you can use the actual volume knob that's built into the containers up here. I just think it's strange to look at it from the top if I'm going down in my signal flow. You could change this to the layout, and instead of going vertical, you could go horizontal. But I think it's kind of chaotic, and you can drag this with right click. Like the knob actually is at the end, but I think the rest of it is really, really chaotic. So I'm not sure if I like this horizontal view. Do whatever works for your brain. Like you don't have to follow my lead. The concept is the only thing that matters, right? And again, if you like this, just render it, commit it, freeze it, print it, whatever you want to call it, but please just commit to certain decisions. So you can save it as a container by just opening the FX, Control S or Command Save, and saving this as an FX chain, and just keeping this container loaded at any time. You can also save, and I have made a video on this as a track template with all of the routing properly. So you could just right-click this, save tracks as template, and just do the proper sense for the routing and the inner tracks to do whatever they are meant to do. And your third version, to avoid getting biased by level, is again, you do either the first routing or whatever, and you just render these stems that you can see are muted already. So these two aren't actually being played. And now I only have this drums clean version and this drums with parallel version. So pretty much this one is exactly the same as this one. You could print them after the fader. I would suggest to do it after the fader, even though you're hardly going to be able to clip inside of Reaper if you touch this 0 dB. And here I'm going to take advantage of another tool where I'm going to analyze the loudness of the selected media items. So I'm going to select both of them and I'm going to get this window. And again, I'm only looking at the momentary metering. So I see that the cleans one are at minus 19.4 and the parallel is at minus 18.6. And this is precise, like there's no doubt whatsoever of what's the difference. So I can just take the drums parallel printed, I can hit the action normalize items, pick RMS loops. It's going to pop up this window and I'm going to normalize each item separately and I'm going to match this number, minus 19.4. It's going to make the proper adjustments. It's going to lower it by how many dBs those are, because dB is not necessarily loudness because it's K filtered. So it's complicated, but it's going to be as precise as it can. So now, whenever I play one after the other, now it's really hard to really distinguish what are the differences between one and the other. You could do a small null test. I could solo both of them. I'm going to invert the polarity of just one of them by using this flip polarity button. And now I will only listen to the differences between these two. So I have these really small differences, but there's a difference. It's giving me a bigger tone on the snare. It's going to give me a little bit more of the high end of the hi-hats. And those are the actual differences. If you want to really remove or completely remove the level, volume, loudness bias, you have to do a couple of extra steps and let the computer do the math and just level them properly, because our systems, our speakers and headphones and ears are precise, but numbers are numbers, and I'm going to match them using equal loudness, right? These are 3 ways with a small extra on the Paranormal FX that you can try and do, especially in Reaper, to try and really select and not being taken away by the volume or the loudness of one thing after the other. Because louder is not always better. It's not. Like, let's get over it. One last tip that I want you to have is, I have showcased this plugin previously on my channel. So I'm going to load from the freeware of Hofa Audio, the blind test plugin. I'm going to set it up in 2 tracks. I have the drums clean and drum cleans with parallel, and I'm going to hide the metering of those 2, so I don't know which one it is. In the free version, it only lets you set up to 3 tracks. I'm going to hit start. It's going to randomize them. I can hit play. I can solo number 1 and number 2. Try to guess which one I like the most. and then show the tracks. Which one did you like more? I'd honestly go with the top one with number 1. I'm going to show tracks, and I actually liked more the clean drums in this case. That tells us something. If you'd like to support my channel, there's a link in the description, affiliate link for Plugin Boutique, the Buy Me a Coffee link because I also like coffee. And be sure to comment, like, subscribe, share this video with someone that might enjoy it as well, and all of those things that people on YouTube say. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.